the top 10 foods for fitness. I'm super stoked to be cracking into this legendary list with you. This is going to be a total game changer because food is not just energy, it's information. And my sole objective here is to arm you with the information to give your mind and body the best possible kind. Food can either be the greatest help or single greatest hindrance that invariably infects and impacts every single aspect of your entire existence. Look, I shudder at the thought that what you see on screen now, being the 1992 US government inspired and issued dietary guidelines, came to fruition the year preceding my birth. If I had access to the top 10 food list that I'm going to be giving you now, I can only imagine how much better my life would have been. I'll talk about that briefly in just a minute, but I wanted to include this brief overview of this presentation to give you an idea of what we're going to be touching on, which in a couple of slides will be the often espoused as optimally healthy top 10 list in the fitness sphere. And I'm just going to briefly dissect that for you. And then I'm going to give you a very potent framework and philosophy for how I view food. And I'm going to give you a really powerful analogy that I'm really excited about and I think will really inspire you and set the tempo and proper precedent for the top 10 dissemination in descending order. We'll start with number 10 and go all the way to number 1. Numbers 1 through 7, by the way, I actually eat every single day, and I'm going to give you some incredibly practical insights into how I actually do that, where the rubber meets the road, how I incorporate these into my diet on a daily basis. And then I want to introduce you to my website, alphaactualization.com, where you can learn more. Now, if you're new to my channel and you've never seen my face before, my name is Jason and my background is in healthcare. I graduated with a doctorate degree in pharmacy in 2018, but my real passion is personal development and paying forward the greatest possible insights to you to help catalyze your conversion into the man that you know you can be. In 2015, the picture that you see on the far left, that was the same year that I came into contact with the information that I'm going to be giving you in this video today. And it really helped catalyze my conversion into the man that you see here. This is just a recent physique update photo, hopefully to inspire you as to what's possible. And the picture that you see in the middle is just my esophagus from 2009 to 2023. When I was 15 years old, I was actually diagnosed with this apparently incurable rare disease called eosinophilic esophagitis. And the way that I reversed that was by putting food first, paying the farmer on the front end, and not the pharmacy on the back end. Now, this list here is the often espoused as optimally healthy top 10 foods within the conventionally prevailing nutritional paradigm. Let's take these from the top, starting in the top left. Lean beef, which is incredibly healthy. There's nuance with this list. I don't vehemently disagree with everything. The problem with lean beef is where it's coming from. I recommend lean beef not at the exclusion of fatty beef, but this list does because it vilifies and demonizes saturated fat. I promote lean beef because I'm lactose tolerant and I can get even more saturated fat from full fat dairy. So that's the fundamental difference between this paradigm and mine. Whey protein, nothing inherently wrong with that. This is a highly bioavailable, easily digestible, anabolic protein that is a milk derivative. 20%, by the way, of the proteins that constitute whole milk is whey protein, the other 80% being casein. What I don't like about whey protein is that it doesn't dovetail with the same micronutrients that you would get from whole and minimally processed foods. So I'd rather you omit the purchase of whey protein and reallocate that money towards buying real food. Eggs are awesome, but again, it's the place that it's coming from. Oftentimes, eggs in the fitness sphere are recommended to be eaten without the yolk, which is the most nutrient dense aspect of the egg. The fear there being dietary cholesterol, which is only problematic if it's oxidized prior to consumption. And whole grains, honestly, have no redeeming qualities, and I recommend omitting their consumption outright because of the appreciable phytic acid that inevitably is contained therein. And that's going to chelate a lot of the key micronutrients that you would otherwise be able to absorb assimilate and utilize in everything else that you're eating. Fruits and vegetables, again, it's where it's coming from. These are a really great source of micronutrients and antioxidants, which is incredible, but it's the fact that they get pedestalized above meat and dairy, especially as you saw in the 1992 US government issued dietary guidelines. Oatmeal is a total trash source of carbohydrates, and I vehemently disagree with this placement here on the top 10 list. The truth is that oatmeal is really chock full of a lot of toxic heavy metals, phytic acid, a really potent anti-nutrient. You've got saponins, you've got glyphosate, you've got pesticides. Honestly, we're going to do a lot better than this. Fear not. Healthy fats. Again, it's the place that it's coming from. I recommend MUFA, just like lean beef, but not at the exclusion of saturated fat and fatty beef. The healthy fats shown here from nuts, olive oil, and avocados are perfectly fine as they are oleic acid rich. That's the parent monounsaturated fat. But it's the fact that these are promoted because they are not saturated fat, as opposed to being promoted like I promote them in my paradigm because they're not polyunsaturated fat. Skinless chicken. The problem with modern poultry is the same problem with modern humans. Both chickens and humans are consuming ancestrally inappropriate and frankly impossible amounts of linoleic acid. And both chickens and humans are monogastric animals. That linoleic acid bioaccumulates because of the corn and soy that modern chickens are fed, as opposed to what they would consume in a free-feeding, free-range fashion, such as bugs and worms. And the problem is that linoleic acid then gets inherited by you prior to consumption. Cottage cheese, a really great dairy product. The problem again is the paradigm being the emphasis of low-fat dairy, or frankly no-fat dairy, as opposed to what I recommend, which is full-fat dairy. Tuna and other fish, I like that salmon is depicted here, but I don't like the pedestalization of tuna, which has an order of magnitude more mercury than, for example, salmon. Sure, it's a good source of protein, but it should not be prioritized as a protein source over beef and dairy, because not least the microplastics that accumulate in modern fish. And so this is a very potent analogy that I honestly hope inspires you. This is the 1992 Dream Team, the US basketball team who absolutely annihilated all of their opponents. And as you see here, outscoring them by 43.8 points on average per game. They didn't call a single timeout. They had Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, you've got Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Scottie Pippen, just the ultimate assemblance of individuals. And I want you to see your nutrition in a similar light. See it as a schoolyard pick, and you've got unlimited, an infinite amount of first draft picks. It's not a zero-sum game. You can have Michael Jordan on your team. I can have Michael Jordan on my team. There is enough to go around, and you can literally curate a diet that becomes the single greatest unfair advantage of your entire life. Let's crack into this top 10 list now. Number 10, we've got macadamia nuts. In terms of nuts, macadamia are the absolute lowest in PUFA. You can see per 21.5 grams of fat that they supply, only 0.4 grams of that is polyunsaturated. It's about 2% PUFA, which absolutely checks the box that I would want you to check in terms of remaining disease-free long-term. Macadamia nuts also offer a number of different micronutrients. It's a pretty good source of manganese and copper, and overall isn't going to be a net negative in terms of introducing an obnoxious amount of defense chemicals. If you're struggling to get half of a gram per pound of body weight in fat, this could be a really good way to increase your fat intake, again, because it's so low PUFA. Number 9, we've got wild blueberries. My home state of Maine is really famous for producing, I believe, 99% of all of the blueberries in the United States. This is an incredible source of potent antioxidants. And honestly, antioxidant augmentation is the number one thing that you could do to not end up in one of the nursing homes that I consulted at, where people are literally drooling over their lip and chin. Cognitively impaired individuals with dementia could have been greatly behooved by improving their antioxidant intake and avoiding excess oxidative stress. For example, by way of avoiding industrial seed oil consumption, which is what the residents of these homes were having their food cooked in prior to having it served to them on a silver platter. Wild blueberries are a really great source of manganese, and this is the number one berry that I would recommend. Moving along now to number 8, we've got sweet potatoes, which is a very great starch source, very rich in beta carotene, which is a retinol, vitamin A precursor. Also has myriad other micronutrients here, such as manganese, copper, potassium. It's really quite micronutrient rich and does not have a lot of plant defense chemicals that you would otherwise have to worry about. For people who say that carbohydrates are all bad and inherently toxic, I would just point you to this 1981 publication, and I quote, "Investigators found them to be fit, lean, and muscular with no sign of protein deficiency." Now, this is in regards to the Tucasenta, a tribe of individuals whose diet consists of 95% of sweet potato. The truth is that I always wanted a nutritional paradigm that could reconcile everything, something that was actually self-consistent and didn't unfairly demonize something that was consumed in mass amounts by cultures around the world, such as the Japanese, who consume a lot of white rice. How do we square the circle of their robust health and longevity if carbohydrates are inherently bad? So number 7, this is the first of that which I consume on a daily basis. This is a very recent addition to my diet, and I lean on salmon because of the docosahexaenoic acid content, the DHA. Historically, I've actually been supplementing with DHA, but honestly, any fish oil is inherently rancid. It's got oxidized fats in it because of the extraction process. And the prospect of those fats getting incorporated into my brain is not something that I wanted to contend with long term. And if you are taking a fish oil supplement right now, I highly recommend omitting that consumption and switching to wild caught salmon. And I'll show you on screen how I actually prepare this, which is that I take the frozen filet, I'll thaw it for a few hours in my fridge, honestly, just enough so that I can take my knife and I can slice and dice it into smaller portions. I take the weight on the package, let's say it's 1 pound, I convert that to grams, which would be about 454, and I divide that by 30. 30 is the number of grams of salmon that I just throw into my Instant Pot each night with my dinner, and that gives me about 200 milligrams of DHA. One of the great aspects of salmon is that it's relatively low in EPA, unlike a lot of other sources of seafood, and that's going to interfere with your endocrine system and also stifle your ability to expeditiously recover from high volume training. Moving along now to number 6, pomegranate juice. This is my favorite source of antioxidants, and the reason that I don't consume wild blueberries on a day-to-day basis because I'm consuming 250 milliliters of a 100% pomegranate juice sold in glass. This is pretty acidic, so ideally you would refrain from purchasing it in plastic, for example, just because that will invariably leach into the solution. But you can see on screen the microscopic minutia, if you will, in regards to its antioxidant, anti-osteoporotic, antibacterial, anti-cancer, anti-diabetic, anti-inflammatory, hepatoprotective, vasculoprotective, and hypotensive benefits. And what I'd really like to draw your attention to are the vasculoprotective effects, not least decreased LDL susceptibility to oxidation and hence decreased foam cell formation. This lies at the heart of the true etiology, the true cause of cardiovascular disease. And pomegranate juice supplemented daily is the number one thing that you can do on a daily basis to ensure that you never have to contend with the consequences of such. And I've actually included some of my own personal blood work just to corroborate this with you. These are my cardio metabolic markers, and you can see my HDL of 73 relative to my 54 triglyceride. You can see my homocysteine, high sensitivity C-reactive protein, oxidized LDL, all in a really optimal range, as is my plaque test. This measures your phospholipase A2 activity. The higher that number is, ostensibly, the more oxidized LDL that is being dealt with. So the lower this number, the better. You can see mine is 118, and the optimal range here being less than 224. So I'm at about half that number. Now, number 5 is something that could potentially rub people the wrong way because it is a refined grain. But look, just like how you can have Michael Jordan and I can have Michael Jordan on my team, we don't need 5 Michael Jordans. Some of our players need to be assisting one another. We want overall our team to be optimal. And so instead of looking at each individual player on the team, we have to look at how they work together. And the way that basmati rice works in the context of this top 10 list is that it's not interfering with the all-stars of our team, which we haven't even gotten to, numbers 1 through 4. It's because it's the lowest in phytic acid and arsenic, and also has the lowest GI glycemic index, that I rely very heavily on basmati rice. Not for its micronutrients aside from manganese, but the fact that it's a really good source of starch to replenish my muscle glycogen, allow me to train with a lot of volume and not interfere with the bioavailability of the nutrients found in, for example, foods 1 through 4. Speaking of which, we've got number 4, beef liver. This is a highly bioavailable source of all of the nutrients that you see on screen now. I use beef liver in a way similar to salmon, where I'm using it in a supplemental fashion. And so I'm eating just a little bit every single day, about 10 grams raw and frozen. That's just the best way that I've found to consume it. If you don't have the taste buds for this, you can certainly get desiccated liver tablets or, for example, an amino acid chelated copper supplement. But this is an incredible source of so many different nutrients. You've got vitamin A, iron, copper, chromium, vitamin B12, cyanocobalamin, something that vegans, unless they're supplementing appropriately, will invariably become deficient in. Beef liver is a true powerhouse, and I highly recommend it in a supplemental fashion. So ideally no more than half an ounce per day. That's about 14 grams. You just don't want to go overboard on the copper because that's going to compromise your zinc to copper ratio. Moving along now to number 3, we've got free range eggs, another absolute powerhouse. The way that I prepare this is by taking 2 eggs and just placing it in my Instant Pot. I set it to 6 minutes on low pressure. Ideally get free range eggs. These are going to be higher in DHA and other nutrients that you see on screen now. One not often talked about is arachidonic acid, which is within the umbrella of omega-6 that you see here. 1,148 milligrams on average per egg. Arachidonic acid is the parent omega-6 polyunsaturated fat, and that's going to give you an unfair advantage in terms of expeditiously recovering from really intense workouts and helping to promote hypertrophy of your muscles. Eggs are an absolute powerhouse, and I recommend consuming 2 to 4 every single day. Next, we've got number 2, which was honestly a total toss-up with number 1. So many people are lactose intolerant, so in good faith, I couldn't put it at number 1. But for me, because I do digest dairy so effectively, it probably would be number 1 for me. This is a workhorse, a total machine of a food, offers a plethora of micronutrients. Every single macronutrient is represented, has the best ratios of saturated, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated fat, a high amount of leucine, that's the rate-limiting amino acid to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. It has casein, that's very anti-catabolic, whey protein, very anabolic. Honestly, this is an incredible source of nutrition from which all other full-fat dairy products are derived. One thing that I highly recommend trying if you are lactose intolerant, this is honestly the first thing that I would do if that were the case for me. I would literally right now go to the supermarket and I would buy some whole milk and I would dissolve a lactate tablet in the glass and let that work prior to consumption. So instead of taking the lactate tablet prior to drinking the milk, I would literally dissolve it in the milk and allow it to go to work and start digesting the lactose prior to consumption. This is something that you should definitely give a shot and see if that works for you before giving up on dairy full stop. Now, without further ado, we've got number 1, beef, the best. Red meat has been unfairly demonized and vilified for decades because of saturated fat's impact on your lipid panel, which is that it's going to increase your LDL. All the while, nobody tells you this, it decreases the susceptibility of that lipoprotein to oxidation, which is necessary and sufficient for atherosclerosis to ensue. Oxidative modification of lipoproteins is a necessary step in the pathogenesis of cardiovascular disease, and it's something that we need to bold, italicize, and underscore. Beef is honestly the best thing that you could be consuming on a day-to-day basis to become micronutrient repleted. This is something that crosses so many nutritional T's and dots so many nutritional I's, from the bioavailable heme iron, the zinc, which is absolutely essential for steroidogenesis. It's really rich in a lot of the B vitamins, has hardly any anti-nutrients, has a very favorable 1-to-1 ratio of saturated and monounsaturated fat, while being very low, about 2% PUFA, irrespective virtually of whether it's grass or grain fed. And so while I would recommend opting, if you can, for grass-fed, grass-finished beef, if that isn't available to you or not feasible for you financially, don't let perfection be the enemy of execution. Beef is the single greatest food that in good conscience I could offer as an umbrella recommendation for the entire population. This could truly revolutionize human health if only people knew. Lastly, I wanted to mention Alpha Actualization. This is my website that you can navigate to and see, hopefully, as your cheat code for life. It's going to be your map to become the man. And briefly, I'll pull up this website here just to show you some of the recent articles that you will have access to after navigating to it yourself. The most recent article might be of interest to you. It's titled here, "Why Training Every Other Day is Ideal for Most People." The two preceding that were "Only Take Supplements You Actually Need" and "Resistance Training Guidelines for Health and Aesthetics." This is honestly the greatest gift that I could possibly give you. And I hope you're excited when these new articles come to fruition, because these are additional puzzle pieces of one that is ever emerging and is going to just better tune, calibrate your ability to get the things that you want in this life, to do so effectively while being at ease with yourself, while being in a physiologically fixed, endocrinologically optimized fashion. I hope you're excited for the future like I am. That's it for today, my friend. Drop a comment down below, like and subscribe for more content like this. And as always, until next time, find your freedom. Peace.